You are live on Facebook.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the third night of the Progressive Candidate Summit. I said last night that last night was important, and it was. We saw video all over this country. We saw in Iowa City, we saw in Houston. Today I saw video even in Los Angeles of peaceful protesters being beaten by cops. What is going on in this country? Why are cops going into crowds of peaceful demonstrators? And I remind you, not that any of us need to be reminded, that this is a constitutionally protected right, and putting tear gas and beating people with batons and shooting rubber bullets. We saw a picture, a video of New York City policemen actually beating a man on his bicycle last night in New York. They're at 50th and 3rd. Today it was in Fairfax district. I've lived in so many of these places. I'm like, wait, that's like my neighborhood. Now I want to make it really clear. I do believe most police people are very good people, but something is going on. What I've been thinking is that there's an infiltration of our police by white nationalists. Something very, very sinister is going on. I felt almost last night like we were being punished for the fact that all 4 of the officers were actually charged in the George Floyd case. Whatever's going on, we need to respond to it. Our ancestors have responded to very problematic and even wicked forces in their time. We pushed back against the forces of slavery, and we won. Our ancestors pushed back against the forces of the institutionalized suppression of women, and they won. Our ancestors, sometimes even our own parents and grandparents, pushed back against institutionalized white supremacy and segregation in the American South during the Civil Rights Movement, and they won. It is our turn now. Something is going on. Everything's happening so fast that we're not all totally sure exactly what's going on, but we know something is going on. Today, you probably saw the pictures of military personnel on the streets of Washington, D.C. Now, I can't imagine that anybody needs to be reminded, but military personnel have a completely different function than domestic police. Military personnel have to be trained to kill. They have to be trained to defeat an enemy. But domestic police are not here to defeat an enemy, except some violent criminal element. They are here to serve and protect the citizens of the United States. And that includes serving and protecting citizens who are peacefully protesting, once again, which is a constitutional right. So what do we have to do? We're going to have to make a lot of changes. And what is the core element to making those changes? A different set of people in government. And it doesn't just mean a new president. It is just as important. The co-equal branch, remember 3 co-equal branches, Supreme Court, White House, and Congress. Who is the makeup of our House of Representatives? Who are our senators? And that's why we're doing this Progressive Candidate Summit, so that you can meet some of the people that you might just not know. And as we were saying last night, it's not as simple as, well, vote for the Democrat, for those of you who are on the left of the political spectrum. And I must say that what's going on today isn't about left or right. It's about loving our democracy versus some forces that are seriously seeking to undermine it. We're talking about a progressive vision within the Democratic Party, or maybe even not within the Democratic Party, a progressive vision, although all of the candidates that we are highlighting here are running as Democrats. They are, because they're running as Democrats, not necessarily being supported by the Democratic establishment. That's the issue. And that's why I want to do everything I can to introduce you to them, to introduce them to you, and hopefully gain your support for their campaigns. Let me introduce you to our guest tonight, Hector Oseguera. Hector, come on and be with us. Hi, it's so nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you, and a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Hector is running in New Jersey's 8th district, and he is running in the Democratic primary, against an incumbent who has been there for 12 years. And you know, that's really what we're talking about, guys. It's like whatever's happening now, even in the House of Representatives, which is led by the Democrats, the job's not getting done. And at a time like this, with everything that we're going through, God knows we need some real change, some fundamental change. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Hector. I know people would like to hear a little bit about what you've done with your life so far. I know your mother was from the Dominican Republic. Your father was from Honduras, right? So you grew up with immigrant parents. I think that's extremely important, particularly Latino. I know people would like to hear a little bit about your background, why you're running, and then I really want you to lay it down for us. What's going on in the United States today, and what would you do about it as a congressman?
Wonderful. So thank you again, Marianne, for having me.
Thank
My
you.
name is Hector Oseguera, and I'm running in New Jersey's 8th District. And the 8th District is best described as the Hispanic gerrymander. There are cities in my district, Jersey City and Newark being the best examples, that are literally cut in half between the majority Hispanic parts and the majority African American parts of those towns, specifically along the lines of divide and conquer. I was raised in an immigrant household with parents who worked their entire lives. My father, before he passed away, worked every single day of his life trying to put food on the table for our family. And I remember in 8th District where one working class income was enough to pay the bills, pay your rent, maybe take your family on a vacation once a year, maybe go out for a night on the town once in a while. And unfortunately, that reality has evaporated for so many of the people in my district.
And for
Even-
millions and millions of Americans all across the country.
Indeed. Even many two-income households find it hard to get by. And that's really what's animated my run for Congress. My opponent has been in power literally my entire life. He was the mayor of my hometown in West New York when I was just a young child. And he is part of an establishment, what we call the political machine here in New Jersey, that simply does not care about the working class. They care about consolidating power. They care about stealing opportunity, because that's what corruption really is. Corruption is opportunity stolen from those who deserve access to those opportunities, and really has kept the working class, which is the backbone of our economy and the backbone of America, under the heel of this very oppressive boot. And so I've decided to challenge this machine. I've never been a candidate for office before. I really thought that my role in politics was to be a volunteer for others like AOC, like Bernie, like Elizabeth Warren, all of whom I volunteered for, and to help others who were maybe more fit for office realize their vision. And what I came to see is that we're all qualified to hold office. If you have a vision, if you think that we deserve better out of our elected officials, you should be running for office as well. And that's really what's animated me. I'm worried about the future of America. I'm worried about the future of my district. And I truly believe that the working class is sick of what's going on. These crises that have exploded in front of us have shown that there is no better time to wake up and to realize that what has been done for so long simply is not working, and we need a new way forward.
And it's time for the people to step in.
Absolutely.
Also, I think that a lot of people don't realize that the radicalism of the American experiment is that we, the people, are supposed to be in charge. We've been trained mentally to expect too little and to also just give over our power in too many ways to this political class. You know, the word politeia, politics comes from a Latin root, politeia. It means of the people. It doesn't mean this political elite. And of course, the Constitution doesn't even mention political parties, and George Washington warned us against them. Also, as we were actually talking about last night, when it comes to the House of Representatives, the founders called it the People's House. They wanted the People's House to be filled with the blacksmith and with the farmer and with the tailor. It was supposed to be where the people were. A friend of mine said to me the other day, who is a very right-wing side of the political spectrum, and she doesn't like AOC, and I adore AOC. And she says, "Oh, who is this woman? She was just a bartender." I said, "That's the point. She's
Indeed.
well-educated, cool woman. She was a bartender. Good for her." That's what's supposed to be happening. And of course, you went to law school. You passed the bar, et cetera. It's not like you don't have quite a resume yourself. So tell me, what's going on in America, and how are we going to fix it?
Well, right now we are experiencing the pandemic of 1918, the Great Depression, and the civil upheaval of the 1960s all at the same time. And here in the 8th District, like across the country, we've had peaceful marches, peaceful rallies to stand up and fight back against a police system that does not view people of color as human beings, but as simply tools and pieces of a puzzle to be oppressed, to do your job and never speak back. And just as you said, the founders of this country saw the House of Representatives as a home for citizen legislators, for individuals who were not of this upper crust, which is what they envisioned the Senate to be, but the House to be the home of the people, where the average person could be elected and had the support of their community and had the support of the people, the everyday man and woman who had to put food on the table, who had to go to work Monday through Friday, and the people could really rely on that person to have their best interests at heart. And my, have we strayed from that path. But yeah, here in the 8th District, the people are really, really worried about what our police force is doing to Black men and women across the country. They are worried about how Flint, Michigan has come to Newark, New Jersey. Newark, New Jersey has a lead in the water crisis that nobody in the national media is talking about, but that the people in Newark know all too well. My friends at the Newark Water Coalition every single day are delivering water and helping people. And there are just so many issues that we should not be having to deal with here in America. For the greatest, most powerful, most civilized nation in the world, we're really dealing with a lot of uncivilized problems, so to speak. And it's really a shame.
When we were talking, of course, this originally began as a conversation about police brutality towards Black men and Black women, even to the point of executing unarmed people. But now it has turned even more sinister, and that we're now talking about police brutality against peaceful protesters who were there protesting police brutality. What needs to be done?
Well, we need to hold police accountable, number one.
What does that look like? What are the legislative changes?
Well, Marianne, are you ready for me to get a little controversial on you tonight?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not exactly one who stays within a box myself.
Wonderful. So, you know, what that looks like is for, so currently settlements for these sorts of issues come out of the taxpayer dollar. It's you and me that pay for it when an officer murders a George Taylor, murders a Breonna Taylor, murders a Trayvon Martin. It is us who pay.
That was not. But let's make it really clear. That was not a.
Was not a police officer, but it certainly was somebody who was aspiring to be.
Of course, yeah.
And what police accountability looks like is for those settlements to start coming out of the police pension funds rather than out of the taxpayer dollar. Because if the police believed that they would be held accountable for these sorts of incidents, watch how quickly they start to hold themselves accountable. Currently, the police unions never turn on a police officer, no matter how egregious their problems are, no matter how many times they've been brought up on abuse of power charges or on brutality charges. They never turn on these police officers because they know that it's somebody else who's going to be left holding the bag. So if we were to make a change in policy and made these settlements come out of the police pension, watch how quick that thin blue line begins to crumble and police officers begin to hold others accountable.
I hope so. I fear that there's something deeper than money going on, and that has me deeply concerned. What do you think that's going to happen now with Trump and talking about, I mean, today there actually was a conversation at the White House that was reported where they said all options are on the table. You think we were talking about North Korea or Iran or something like that. We're talking about the people of the United States. We're talking about our fellow citizens. We're talking about our children who are showing up in the vast majority of these at this point are peaceful protests. You know, at the beginning with the looting, et cetera, I don't think anybody would disagree. Appropriate force was called for, but that's not what's going on now. We're watching police go after peaceful protesters, and that's what makes me worry about it being something beyond money. Does it seem to you, as someone who is applying for a job with your constituents, to be a member of the House of Representatives, do you feel like the Democrats are showing, what would you like to see? What would you like to see Joe Biden say? What would you like to see Nancy Pelosi say?
Well, I'd really like them to say that this is unacceptable, that the use of violence against peaceful protesters is not something that we expect to see in America. They really should be standing with us on the side of justice, because you're right, this is deeper than money. This is more about power and control. That is the poison that infects the political establishments in this country. And Donald Trump himself is drunk on power. He sees himself as having no filter, nobody to cage him in. And that's incredibly dangerous in a democratic society like ours. We work off check and balances. No branch is supposed to be able to supersede another, but we really do see an executive that sees himself as above the other branches. He said it himself.
Unfortunately, too many senators in his own party have acquiesced their own congressional authority. I thought that Biden's talk the other day was very, very touching and very sincere. I just think we need more. And of course, Nancy went outside with the protesters, et cetera. But it feels to me like the Democratic Party to really hold the moral authority of their purpose need to go a lot further. How do you feel that the fact that your parents were immigrants? I know my father was an immigration lawyer, so I was raised, and my grandparents were all immigrants. What about the issue of immigration in your district and in the country?
I mean, it's a tremendous issue, and it's something that I've seen myself organize around. One of the reasons that I'm running currently is because, yes, my district is a majority Hispanic district. Most of the people in this district came here from another part of the country. And whether you came to this country through Ellis Island or Newark Airport, you came here looking for the same thing, for an opportunity to share in the American dream. And what we've seen is an ICE that has been empowered to abuse people. A group of activists went to my opponent's office not that long ago when the detention centers were making headlines and asked something very, very pragmatic of him. Not would you abolish ICE as an institution, but merely would you reduce funding to ICE at least until the detention centers are under control? And he told those activists representing a majority Hispanic district that he would never vote to cut a penny from ICE, and that he believes that ICE does great work. Again, mind you, this is at the height of the detention center crisis. And so ICE is just another tool for power, another tool for control. And unfortunately, we've been organizing at the prisons in my district to make sure that the individuals that are detained there for profit by the county machine know that we're aware of what's going on. We care about them. We're ready to stand up and fight back for our immigrant communities.
Okay, everybody, if that wasn't enough to make you want to take out your credit card, your wallet, your whatever, and help this man get elected, I don't know what does. So it's my turn now to just ask you to please consider a financial contribution to Hector's campaign. If you go to Oseguera, Oseguera is Oseguera 2020.com. Or you can also see it there at the progressivecandidatesummit.com or osegueda.com, Oseguera 2020.com, any amount that you can give. Because remember, as I keep saying here, the Democratic establishment spends a lot of money supporting the Democratic establishment candidates. And you know, it's almost hard to believe that you've got a Democrat who was talking about how ICE just does great work and he doesn't see anything wrong with it. Obviously, there's a problem with ICE. It's the culture. I think there does need to be, there's a function there that needs to be played by someone, but how anybody can doubt some of the cruelty, some of the brutality of the methods, and that create some of the real terror that so many people live in this country. You know, my mother told me, my parents told me when I was little, there's no such thing as an illegitimate child, and there's no such thing as an illegal person. You know?
Indeed. God bless.
if we want these changes to happen, that's what's so important about people like Hector and all the people, not only that what you're meeting here in the summit, but also on our endorsee list. If you want change, you know, sometimes I hear people say, oh, we've tried. And I think about these people, really, how hard did you really try? And you can't leave electoral politics out of it. The injustices, the entrenched injustices in American society today, the problem is not just that they are in our consciousness, but that they are coded in law. They're coded in our economic laws. They're coded in our environmental laws. They're coded in our criminal justice laws. And if we want that to change, we have to change the people who make those laws. I want to talk to you about one more thing, and then I want to bring in a couple of people, Hector, who I know have questions I want to ask you. Talk to me about the issue of corruption. Not just in New Jersey, but also around this country. I think most people listening, if not everybody, would say that there's clearly we have a corruption problem. What does that mean, and how can it be changed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's talk about corruption, because I think that no matter what your pet issue is, whether you're an environmental activist, whether you're an immigration rights activist, whether your issue is Medicare for all or public education, no matter what issue you're passionate about, the reason that that issue is a problem and you have to organize is because if you dig in deep in the background, there are high dollar donors, there are very wealthy people who benefit from that problem never getting fixed.
Okay, so stop right there, because I want everybody's, we want the synapses to be really clear here. One of the things we all really need to be clear about is that the undue influence of money, particularly corporate money, on our political system is the cancer that underlies all the other cancers. So when people say the system isn't working, actually what Hector just said was very important. Oh, it's totally working the way a certain group of people want it to be working. So what you and I see too often as a problem that needs to be fixed, these particular forces see as not their responsibility to have to worry about, and that if what we see as a problem undercuts their ability to create short-term corporate profit, then they are actually willing to be obstructions to what you and I would see as the problem getting fixed. And they give so much money in donations because of Citizens United particularly, that they can give unlimited donations to the candidates who make sure that the problem doesn't get fixed. Was that about it, Hector?
That is absolutely it. And I would tell you, if you want to know why things are a problem, look into the FEC filings of your local elected official. My opponent raises 99% of his donations from large wealthy contributors and corporate PACs. Less than 1% of his donors are everyday working class men and women.
I want you to repeat all that, because it's something we know, but it's like somehow we're not breathing it in and taking it in as deeply as we need to. You say it again.
If you want to know why an issue is not getting fixed, look no further than the FEC filing of your local official, where you will find the heart and soul of the corruption in this country.
And tell me again about those numbers with your opponent and why we need to feed him at the polls.
Yeah, 99% of his, actually 99.4% of his donors are wealthy individuals and corporate PACs. Less than 1%, 0.6% of his donors are everyday working class men and women like me and you.
Well, there's your problem right there. And I hope some of those regular men and women like you and me will go to Osegueda2020.com right now and give what you can to support Hector in his work. Because if we don't support these progressive candidates, then nothing's going to ever change. That's as simple as that. I want to bring in a couple of people who have questions to ask. I want to start with Gabriel Clementi. Gabriel, come on in and ask your question to Hector. Hi, how are you? I think I need to, somebody needs to put your microphone to unmute you.
Perfect.
Oh, hi, okay.
There you go. Yeah.
Hi, welcome.
Hi,
Gabriel, meet Hector and ask away.
All right, well, just to repeat something we already probably know, we are living in challenging times. Our broken American and world system is collapsing at the hands of a microscopic monster that has wreaked havoc on our health, social, economic, and political systems. Of course, COVID-19 does not pay attention to the way our country and planet run. Though the virus blew the powder keg that led to our realities of long breadlines and record-breaking unemployment, the lack of protections for and the system working class people suffer under is the real agent that led to this crisis. However, we must not spend our time lamenting what we could have done, but rather we must look to the future, which is who we have right here. So my question is, for Hector, what will you do to respond to the needs of working class people during this COVID-19 political, economic, social, and health crisis?
That's a great, great question, Gabriel. Thank you for asking that question. So what do I propose to look into the future and help working class men and women deal with this ongoing crisis? Because Lord knows that 3/4 of the bailout packages that have gone out have been to large corporations and businesses, not everyday working class men and women. So if you go to my website, osegueda2020.com, at the top of our issues page, we've released a COVID policy plan for the exact issues that people should care about right now. One thing that I truly fear is that once this health pandemic is over, we're going to be looking at other pandemics spread throughout our country. The first being a homelessness pandemic. Individuals who could not pay their rent, who are only hanging on by a thread, will eventually come out of this pandemic and will be told by their landlords, you owe 3, 4, 5, 6 months worth of rent, and they won't have it. Those people may find themselves on the street. So here in New Jersey, my campaign was the foremost proponent of the Cancel Rent New Jersey movement. What does that mean? That means that if you're a renter, if you're a small homeowner, you own a single family home and you're paying off your mortgage, you should have your rent and your mortgages completely canceled, written off for the duration of this crisis plus 3 months to make sure that you are on a sound economic footing to continue to lead a successful and fulfilling life without the fear that you're going to end up homeless through no fault of your own.
Okay, so let's talk about this, because then in a case, for instance, in that one, then what happens to the landlord who also has to pay the mortgage?
Well, the mortgage would be canceled as well for the duration of this crisis plus
But
3
then what
months.
about at the end of the crisis?
Well, at the end of the crisis, we're not calling for a balloon payment. We're asking for the government. And
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm asking.
And Ilhan Omar has proposed this in HR, I think it's 6616,
Okay,
to have the government fill in that backstop, because
Right.
they can give the money to the corporations, but what about the everyday?
well, obviously, and the
men and women?
$500 billion that went to corporations that aren't even required to pay their workers. And of course, in other countries like England, the government is paying 80% of people's salaries, sort of freezing the economy. Now, shouldn't we have direct cash relief?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I'm thinking $2,000 a month for every adult, $1,000 for every child.
Yeah, $2,000 a month is the least that we can do
That's
for people in this country, especially given the trillions of dollars that we've given to banks during this crisis.
That's
$2,000
And
a
it's
month.
over
is
to
the
go
least.
back, go to the UBI type $1,000 a month, right? Do you think?
Pardon?
I'm telling you, you're the candidate. Trying to push you here. So at the end of all this, would you support a UBI of $1,000 a month type thing at the end of the pandemic as well?
Absolutely, I would. Maybe $1,000 isn't even really enough. We have to really do more analysis and find out what would be enough to make sure that working class people can, we don't want to cut the legs out from under people coming out of this pandemic. Things are not going to go back to normal. And that's what we have to break out of this paradigm. Everybody keeps thinking, well, things will just go back to normal. Things will go back to normal. There is no going back to normal.
No, I don't actually think anybody's thinking it is. You are for Medicare for all?
100%.
Cut the corporate subsidies?
100%.
Repeal the 2017 $2 trillion tax cut that gave 83 cents of every dollar to the very richest people and corporations?
And reverse it and increase their taxes and make sure that they're paying their fair share to maintaining this society.
And put back in the middle class ones, though, I thought, because I thought the middle class tax cuts that was part of that was a good idea, right? So we put those back in.
Indeed, and in New Jersey, we suffer most from the state and local deductions that were removed from the tax bill from Trump. So this was definitely a stab at blue states like ours that contribute most to the tax burden and take out the least in benefits. So of course, working class people deserve a tax break.
Okay, and then the college loans, what about the college loan debt? $1.5 trillion in that college loan debt?
Completely cancel student loan debt because it is indentured servitude. We are subjecting an entire generation of aspiring working class Americans in my generation to indentured servitude, paying off their student loans for the rest of their lives.
You know, it's an entire paradigm shift. We now have our economic policies guided by the notion that short-term profit for huge multinational corporate entities should drive our economy. And I believe the question, what would help people thrive? That should be the guiding principle of what would should guide our economy. It's an ethical, it's humanitarian, and it economically makes more sense because people who are thriving, who don't have to worry and be in such economic tension and anxiety about healthcare, about education, et cetera, can show up to actualize their dreams, manifest their dreams. And really that's where money comes from.
Indeed.
Doesn't seem complicated to me. Gabriel, do you have any other, how did he do? Did Hector do okay for you?
Like always, he did wonderfully.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
he
you.
answered my question.
Thank you,
Okay,
Gabriel.
I'm sure you're taking a lot of questions on your campaign, Hector, but we have another one for you. And that is a gentleman named Josh Krulik. Josh, hi, come on into the Zoom room. And any second they will have him here. Hi, no, that's you, Gabriel. Do we have Josh Krulik? We seem to be having some technical difficulties. Oh, no. Okay, we're having some technical difficulties. Maybe they'll bring him in at a certain point. What about we have him. Hi, Josh, how are you? I'm sure they'll unmute you any second. Great. Hi,
Yep.
Welcome.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. So here's Hector and ask away.
Perfect. Well, you guys just talked about taxes, and that's what I'm going to refer to today. So, Hector, what will you do to prevent American businesses from banking overseas in tax haven countries such as the Cayman Islands to avoid paying U.S. taxes?
That is a tremendous question, and that actually touches on exactly what I do as a career in anti-money laundering. So if you go to, once again, to Osegueda2020.com, go to our issues page, the anti-corruption platform leads with a very novel idea that I've called the Anti-Panama Papers Act. Some will recall the Panama Papers as a scandal where crooks and fraudsters were bringing their funds to Panama and creating these shell corporations to do exactly what you're saying, avoid paying taxes here in America. What we need to do is implement a global system of taxation that does not allow individuals to hide their gains in places like Panama, Ireland, the Cayman Islands, Cyprus, all of these localities that engage in what we might call forum shopping. One place will lower their tax rate to 5%, somebody will go to 4%, someone will go to 3%, and we have a lot of places now that are just straight at 0%. And what we need is to once again take our leadership role as the global leader in the global economy and come up with a system of taxation that does not allow oligarchs anywhere in the world to stash their gains anywhere on the planet, and make sure that once again, those who have tremendous sums of wealth are contributing to maintaining this society. I read that there is somewhere between 21 and 32 trillion dollars being hidden in these offshore shell corporations in places like Panama, Cyprus, the Cayman Islands. And it's a complete disgrace. And that is why we see our society falling apart all around us.
And tax policy has so much to do with income inequality. It is the main driver of income inequality. Of course, if you look back even to when Eisenhower was president, a Republican, or even Reagan at the beginning, what he did to slash that. You know, there was a time when corporate taxes paid up to 1/3 of our public treasury, and now it pays 11%. People have no idea that taxes used to be so much higher for the very wealthy and for corporations in America. And that was when we had a thriving middle class. And now, because we've had this massive transfer of wealth and only 1% controls 90% more wealth than the bottom 90%, you have tens of millions of people, actually hundreds of millions, who are so stressed because too few resources are being spread among far too many. And it's not, Martin Luther King said we need to avoid the tranquilizing drug of incrementalism. And this is where, once again, you have the difference between a corporatist Democrat and a progressive Democrat. The corporatists are just a better version of the status quo. It was a Democratic House of Representatives that actually okayed the $738 billion National Defense Act. This is outrageous. This is the Democratic House. So whether it's health insurance companies or big pharmaceutical companies or gun manufacturers or food companies or big agricultural conglomerates or oil and gas or defense contractors, the idea that they are this kind of matrix, corporate matrix, they remind me of a new aristocracy. In a very real way, they are a new aristocracy. And of course, their lower taxes are just one of the ways that we reward them. It's just like what used to happen in the, hundreds of years ago, when the system in Europe was that, the landed gentry would get whatever the major resources were, and they drop crumbs from the table for the rest of the serfs. The people that you've been talking about here tonight, Hector, the working class men and women of America, are a new brand of economic serf.
Absolutely.
And taxes are just one way that we really have to attack the problem and make fundamental change.
Indeed, I completely agree. I think we have truly entered a new era of fiefdoms, of corporate fiefdoms, where very few corporate elites think that they're entitled to everything that we produce.
It's so shocking. And the problem in America is not that people can get rich. That's a good thing that people can get rich in America. The problem is that not enough people can get rich in America. When you have 13 million children going to school hungry every day in America, this was even before the pandemic. When you have tens of millions of children who go to school in classrooms where they don't even have the adequate school supplies to teach a child to read, and a child who can't learn to read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation is drastically diminished, the chances of incarceration drastically increased. Where is their opportunity? Even sometimes when I hear people saying give money to historically Black colleges, we're talking about these kids are so locked out of the system way before time when they would be applying to college.
Yeah.
It really, so much of this has to do with very, very young. And Hector, when you talk about your district, and real quickly, I'd like you to name some of the cities that are in your district, just so that people, because I know a lot of people watching are from the New York area. Yeah. And it might be, so name a few of the cities that are in your district, if you will, please.
Yeah, so the New Yorkers who are watching, they will recognize Hoboken, Jersey City, Bayonne, Newark, North Bergen. These are the major, Elizabeth, these are the major cities in my district that really produce a lot of what this country consumes, but the people who produce all of that don't share in the prosperity that is created from it.
And many of those children are, because of the immorality, that is the fact that we primarily base our educational funding on property taxes. Many of the children in your district, I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, are going to what we would consider subpar public schools. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That is completely
I think that's
correct.
the first. Talk about denial of civil rights. To me, the denial of educational opportunity to children should be the great civil rights issue of our day. I will talk about that a lot. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh.
Hector, I think this business of children is so amazingly important, and yet the political establishment is apparently blind to it. These children are not old enough to vote, so they're not a constituency. They're not old enough to work, so they don't provide any they don't wield any economic leverage. And the political establishment just is blind to the fact that we have all these tens of millions of children living in such chronic trauma. And I hope that when you get to Congress, I feel there should be a whole department of children and youth. The level of abuse that is heaped upon America's children, so many of them, not just specifics of actual physical abuse, but just even the passive abuse of a system that denies a proper education to a child. To me, that is a passive form of oppression.
Absolutely, I completely agree. So the systematic abuse of children is something that I speak about a lot when I say that in America, some children go to schools and they look like colleges, and those children are being bred to go to college. Some children go to school and those schools look like prisons, and those children are expected to end up in prison.
That's
And I can
exactly
tell
right.
you in this district, most of the children go to schools that look like prisons. I am a proud product of public schools, and I know the environment that I grew up in. I know that my peers were no less intelligent, no less talented than I was. They just didn't have the same circumstances, and they were no less deserving of the same outcomes that I've had.
And no less intelligent. They were born as children with just, you can, so much happens before the age of 5 and definitely before the age of 8. And, sometimes people look at people like yourself and they would say, oh, he escaped. He escaped the circumstances of his childhood. And I'm like, in the United States of America, no one should have to escape their childhood.
Indeed.
No, one of the things I talked about on the campaign was that Jacinda Ardern, who is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, had said that she wants New Zealand to be the best place in the world for a child to grow up. And I pretty notoriously said, I want to call her and say, girlfriend, you're on, because I would want the United States of America to be the best place in the world for a child to grow up. But we need people like yourself who are in Congress who will speak up for these children, Hector, because they don't wield corporate influence. They are not supported by big corporate PACs. There's no short-term economic gain for huge corporations in actually serving our children. And where are these kids going to be in 20 years? As you said, the chances are more probable that they would end up in prison. Also, psychologists tell us, and some of these neighborhoods are actually referred to as domestic war zones. Psychologists tell us that these children, many of them, are suffering a form of PTSD that is no less severe than the PTSD of a returning veteran from Afghanistan or Iraq.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. And I know that in a lot of urban communities, they begin to name their neighborhoods like war zones. Chicago was named Chirac by the young Black men who grew up there. I know that in the 70s and 80s, Brooklyn was referred to as Brooknam, short for like Vietnam. And that occurs all across America, that children are growing up in places where the murder rates are higher than some war zones. And what children are living with is growing up way too early because they see horrific things and come to see those horrific circumstances as normal. And it's much easier to raise a child than to fix a broken man. And so we need to make those long-term investments now to make sure that 20 years from now, we're not paying the costs of our neglect today.
Well, of course, it's even more sinister than that, because the people, they call it the prison industrial complex. There's a lot of money to be made off that broken man. And the idea that we see anybody suffering as a profit center is so deeply immoral. So I feel very strongly. It's why I once ran for office a couple times, actually, and I felt so strongly about children. And I hope that when you become a U.S. Congressperson, that you will stand up for America's children, because they are vastly, vastly underrepresented. Their welfare, their needs, their education, their opportunities, are so vastly underrepresented in Congress. Every school in America should be a palace of culture and learning and the arts. And we need people such as yourself to be in office in order to say so. I assume you want to get back in the Paris Accords. We have to go so far beyond that. Would you want to get back in the Iran deal?
Yeah, I am completely against war. I was drawn to your candidacy when you said that we should have a Department of Peace, because that's what makes sense. We don't have a Defense Department. That's sort of a euphemism. We have a War Department. And what we should have is a Peace Department that prioritizes ending armed conflicts. Like you said, we're making a ton of money feeding arms to the Saudis to create a civil war in Yemen.
Yeah, it's a genocidal war. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when what's happening with the police is very much the same as what's happened with diplomacy. It's all been militarized.
Yes.
So just like we're seeing the militarization of our domestic police forces in ways that should strike terror in the heart of every American. Another thing that we've done is we've moved the basic diplomatic functions of foreign affairs away from the real diplomats at the State Department and the humanitarian workers and more into the hands of the military, which is a terrible, terrible thing. Because there are things to do if you really want to statistically increase peace and to decrease conflict. And that is to increase economic opportunity for women, educational opportunity for children, to reduce violence against women, and to ameliorate human despair whenever you can. But once again, it's like helping children. Where's the corporate profit in that? That's why we need to, the corporate short-term profit should not be our bottom line. Humanitarian principles should be our bottom line.
Indeed.
And that's why I want to see you in Congress.
Thank
Thank you very, very much. I want all of you to remember that this man's website is Oseguera, Oseguera 2020.com. He is running in the Democratic primary. When is your primary, Hector?
July 7th, and it'll be all vote by mail.
Okay, all vote by mail. July, is that what you said? All vote by mail. July, why is that all vote by mail? Because of COVID?
Well, a group of local activists, and my campaign included, did push Governor Murphy in New Jersey because, yes, COVID makes it very unsafe for individuals to vote traditionally. And we lobbied the governor to expand vote by mail, and he listened to us.
Good. Okay, very good. So all vote by mail. If you are in that district, please support this man. If you are not in that district, you can also support him any amount that you give at Oseguera 2020.com. Remember, his opponent is someone who's been there for a long time. And what's there now is not working. We need new faces, we need new blood, we need new energy. I'm particularly attracted not only to your policies, Hector, and what you stand for politically, but being the son of immigrants, and Latinos specifically, Dominican Republic, Honduras. When you see how much of the core of immigrant injustice has to do with people from south of our border, a real visceral passion about that, I assume, is in your bones, Hector. Am I correct to say that?
Absolutely.
So let's send him in there. Let's get him in there so that he can fix it. Any other words you want to leave the audience with, Hector?
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to be here with you, Marianne. I think that you are definitely owed a tremendous debt of gratitude for promoting Down-Ballot Progressives. This is a very special year. We're living through history. And if people across this country recognize that the political establishment is on its last leg, that it has not served us well, find a local down-ballot progressive. Join my race. I'm always looking for new volunteers. This is a people-powered endeavor, not a corporate PAC-powered endeavor, as so many in the Democratic establishment are. So if you like what you heard today, go to my website. Please get involved. We need your help.
You know, it's so funny. All the people on the summit say, I'm not taking corporate PAC money. And I'm like, corporate PACs wouldn't want to give you any money. That's the whole point. That speaks well of you. Thank you, Hector. Much love to you. Good luck to you. And to all of you, thank you very much. Tomorrow night, we will be back here, 6 p.m. West Coast time and 9 p.m. East Coast time, with a real rock star on the scene, and that is Shahid Buttar, who's running against Nancy Pelosi. This is a big one. Be with us tomorrow night. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you. Bye-bye.